Spoodermans, I'm your host, Napalm Dawn, and today we are here talking about Marvel Future Fight, The Apocalypse is Nigh. So, if you haven't heard the news, and it's slowly been trickling in over late Thursday night and during the day Friday, over at San Diego Comic-Con, affectionately known as SDCC, it has been released that Apocalypse is going to be coming to Marvel Future Fight. So, what exactly is this going to mean? What are we going to be facing? What's our conjecture or possibilities? We'll take a look in this video and discuss what could possibly be happening if we get Apocalypse in this game. How are we going to go about it? Who's going to be the Horsemen? Etc., etc. So, the first thing that we need to talk about is that this is now official. This has been coming out of San Diego Comic-Con. There has been art released for it and everything. So it definitely does not seem to be a fake rumor, fake news thanks to Trump. This seems to be a definite thing. We're getting Apocalypse. So if you recall, if you're a fan of my channel or you've been watching my channel for a while, when I covered the fact that X-Men were coming to Marvel Future Fight, I discussed, could it mean we would eventually get Apocalypse? Now, at the time I said, hey, look, we've got Thanos. He's about just as big as Apocalypse, like, you know, size-wise, scale-wise to a certain degree, as he's been represented in games. And the Black Order could be similar to the Four Horsemen. Now, obviously, there's more than 4 Black Order, but it seems to make sense, doesn't it? I mean, you can imagine if, you know, how Thanos and his Black Order would be very similar to Apocalypse and his Four Horsemen. So, I had some discussion at the time, you know, what might be a possibility, who could the Horsemen be? Well, now that we know, the mutants in the game currently are Wolverine and Magneto, Beast, Rogue, Cyclops, and Phoenix / Jean Grey. So that's the 6 that we're dealing with. Of those, some of them have been the Horsemen before, namely Beast, Magneto, and Wolverine. They have been tied in some iteration or another to Apocalypse as one of his 4 Horsemen. So that means it could be a little tricky to work them in to possibly being one of the 4 Horsemen. If we take the Black Order, for example, they existed not in the game until Thanos came around with his Black Order. There is a rumor that potentially we are going to get costumes for the Black Order. So, it's not like you could quest, okay? Say you did a chapter thing like Odin, or a world boss thing like Proxima Corvus Glaive. How can you quest for a horseman you originally owned? It would have to be accomplished through a uniform. Does that mean you would quest for the uniform? And you'd still have to T2 it? I mean, my guess is that they're going to be native T2s. So, I think it would be very, very awkward if they planned to make 4 Horsemen out of people in the game currently. So, I just want to bring this up, and I want to touch base on what some of the who some of the Horsemen have been in the past, because we kind of need to know the pool that we're working with before we make assumptions or guesses as to who the Horsemen are going to be. So I want to start off by first talking about the Horsemen as they were presented in Marvel Avengers Alliance. So let's give a moment of silence to the death of Marvel Avengers Alliance. It's going on. It's getting close to a year now. Let's pour one out for the homies. Okay, moment of silence over. So, as we know, in Marvel Avengers Alliance, at the time, The playable Four Horsemen were Death, which was Iceman, Famine, which was Rogue, Pestilence, which was Beast, and War, which was X-23. Now, Famine being Rogue certainly makes a lot of sense. Not a hard stretch over there. Rogue always drained people nearly to death when she touched them, and they would sometimes get gaunt and sunken in. Famine makes sense. Beast being Pestilence, he could be smart enough to engineer a biotoxic weapon, a chemical weapon that could poison people to death either slowly or quickly. Makes sense. War, X-23, Feral, the Wolverine connection, Blades, bleeding, you know, it kind of makes sense. Iceman as Death is a little bit of a harder stretch. You could imagine Pesty being Death too, that he could design something that kills people, but they decided to go with Death as Iceman. Marvel Heroes has some of these Apocalypse costumes as well. Now, canon to the game in Marvel Avengers Alliance, Archangel, or Angel, was the former Horseman of Death. Gambit was also a Horseman of Death, and he's represented in Marvel Heroes that way. Hulk, Psylocke, Sunfire, and Wolverine. And then for non-canon, Avalanche, and for the villains, and Sabanur was, of course, Apocalypse, Avalanche, Blob, Dragoness, Living Monolith, Living Pharaoh, Mr. Sinister, Mystique, Selene, Sugarman, and Toad. And let's go over to Apocalypse and take one look over here at his in-game sprite at the time. If you remember one of his abilities, when he would go like this, he would get the big blades out. So this, I think, is the Apocalypse that we wanted from the movies, and we never got. Thanos was always fairly true to his representations, but admittedly, from the movie version, Apocalypse was a little bit disappointing on screen. In the movie, we had Magneto and Storm, Psylocke, and Archangel. So we had some things that were taken from previous iterations, and some things that were a little bit new. Over here on the actual Marvel Wikipedia, Death has been played by Archangel, Caliban, Magneto, Wolverine, Gambit, Psylocke, Banshee, Daken, Grim Reaper, Sentry. Famine has been Autumn, Rolfson, Ahab, Sunfire, Jeb Lee. So there's Sunfire and Psylocke. Pestilence, Plague, Caliban, Polaris, Venom. And for War, Abraham, Kyrios, Hulk, Deathbird, Gazer, and even Colossus. Probably Archangel is definitely one of the most well-known of the Four Horsemen. Sunfire was for a little bit. Caliban as Pestilence. Hulk as War was also a very popular one. Gambit as Death has been pretty popular. And poor Daken going in with X-23 and Wolverine. So, we can see... Let's see, Age of Apocalypse. So, Death has always stood in as kind of Apocalypse's leader if Apocalypse was not around. And down at House of M, Iceman, Angel, Nightcrawler were part of some of the people who tried to fight everything off. I mean, there's been several iterations of it. But we've definitely talked about some of the most popular. Here in the video game section, Akuma was captured by Apocalypse and transformed into Cyber Akuma, serving as a Horseman of Death. Wolverine's revenge in the video game, Horseman of the Apocalypse, was mentioned, and of course Mr. Sinister went in with it. The 16th Spec Ops is when we were dealing with it in Marvel Avengers Alliance. And in films, Days of Future Past, of course, it's got it mentioned over here. Storm, Magneto, Archangel, and Psylocke. We've definitely mentioned that. There's the reference to Mystique as being one of them. Let's see, X-Men animated series, Rolfson, Plague, Adam Curios, Angel, Sentinel Storm, and here's where some of the other ones come in that we've mentioned. So, knowing what we know, who are the ones that we could get as brand new, potentially world bosses, native T2? So one comment was made on one of my Facebook groups today that it could be chapter 13 and 14. I don't think so. Yes, we did get Odin that way. However, I truly believe they will take the framework as being set up by Thanos and the Black Order. And it would be kind of nice to have more options now for world bosses. We have a lot of things that can, use up BAM. BAM can be converted over to things on the X-Men side. So the amount of things that draw from BAM are increasing. So it would make sense that potentially we would increase the pool of things that we could fight for BAM. Or the Apocalypse world bosses would drop the X-Men equivalent instead of directly BAM. So you might get things like, the Phoenix Feathers and the Emkron Shards and all that stuff from fighting those bosses and leave BAM still on the Black Order. Now, that would mean potentially 2 world bosses up per day. However, Apocalypse and the Four Horsemen only 5. What are we going to do? Have duplicates? Have other people who are maybe tied to the Apocalypse storyline but aren't one of the Horsemen? Maybe Apocalypse and Apocalypse. Well, now we're up to 6. Still a little weird. So maybe it'll just take 2 days off. Maybe like Saturday and Sunday you won't have... I don't know. That gives more credence to the thought that it could be a story mission. I still 90% am going to say it's going to be like the Black Order, where they're going to be world bosses. And I think that would be great because it finally gives us something else to do in the world boss category. We have different specials. We have the Doctor Strange quest kind of competes with like the Wolverine stuff. They're similar, but a little different. We have, up to 3 specials now. We have Dimension Rifts, and then we have the World Boss Rifts and everything. It really does make sense that we finally get a world boss, a set of world bosses that are just not Thanos and the Black Dawn. The numbers, the numbers are going to be an issue unless they come up with one, like maybe Mr. Sinister. Maybe it'll be Apocalypse, the Four Horsemen, Apocalypse, and Mr. Sinister. I mean, here's another character that I projected we could possibly get when the X-Men dropped. So now we need to talk about who could potentially be the Four Horsemen if they don't exist in the game today and we're not going to uniform our way into it. So like Venom into Anti-Venom, different characters, we uniformed him in there. Modern Mordo uniformed into Movie Mordo, we could uniform it our way in there. I don't really think you're going to be able to uniform our way into the Four Horsemen. It just seems weird, and if they slap it in there, it's just going to seem hacked a little bit, like just sloppy. So I'm going under the premise that they'll have to be new. We could have Gambit as Death. Certainly a possibility. Now, that's one of the easier ones to talk about. After that, it's gonna get a little bit difficult. I mean, Archangel is Death. That one really seems to fit. We can't do Magneto. We can't do Wolverine. Gambit, Archangel, Psylocke. All 3 of those have a high potential to be there for Death. And I'm sure fans would love any one, if not all three of these people. I loved Psylocke in Marvel Avengers Alliance. I always loved that step in, up swing, downswing. Always just seemed very vicious. The sound was cool, almost like a lightsaber. I always loved that attack from her. I got her in Marvel Heroes and was like, it's a little... She feels a little less punchy. But, I mean, Psylocke would make a great, potentially speed character in this game. Speaking of speed, real quick, let's just say that Apocalypse will probably be universal. That's my guess there. So, before we jump into the Horsemen, let's get that out of the way, is that I think Apocalypse will be a universal villain. It remains to be seen if the Four Horsemen get classified as villains or not. My guess is probably, which would be interesting for Universal Villain Day. So Archangel Gambit Psylocke, that is a tough one. Really, really tough to pick from those. It could very easily be one of the three. I'd love to split them all off and have all three in there under different roles, but that's probably not going to do that. Famine. Maybe Sunfire. I don't know enough about Autumn and Ahab, although Autumn is one of the classic representations. Rogue's already in the game, so they can't go the Marvel Avengers Alliance way. And, you know, MAA always did its, like, with the Worthy. I mean, the Worthy were not who they were in the comics and everything like that. So, I'm going to guess Marvel Future Fight will stay fairly close to things we know before and won't reinvent the wheel. So, Famine's going to be an issue. Maybe Sunfire. Maybe Autumn Rolson. Pestilence, Plague, Caliban, Polaris, Venom, Ikasumi. My guess is maybe Plague. It says she's an old woman. Immune system, immune to all diseases. Potentially she could be there and not take a damage over time effects won't work on her. But if she touches somebody, they take a damage over time effect, like over 10 seconds. Maybe they lose hit points, like a bleed out or a poison or something like that. Famine, maybe if Famine hits somebody, they get slowed or like bound. Maybe they get hit with the bind. Death, probably just raw damage. War, we can't really have Hulk. Abraham Kyrios is one of the original ones. Potentially, it could be him. Mutant with the superhuman power to create explosions in the immediate area by clapping hands. So maybe he could do things as often represented by Hulk. Like, he does an AoE knockback around him. Maybe a targeted cone that has a stun, maybe a cone knockback that's on a shorter cooldown than the big AoE one. I can't even really imagine what Apocalypse's abilities would be. They would be very, very interesting. So, I mean, like, the ones we could definitely rule out are Magneto, Wolverine, Hulk, and that's really about it. I mean, I don't think they would go the route of Colossus. He's too hero-oriented, and just to come out as one of the Four Horsemen would be really weird. I think maybe to avoid conflicts with potentially getting the heroes as heroes later on, like Gambit, for example. I don't know that they would go the route of saying, well, here's Death as represented by Gambit, because then Gambit is kind of off the page for getting him as a hero later, and people might be a little upset about that. So I think maybe they will just go the route of strictly villains, like maybe Caliban, Rolfson, Plague, and Abraham Kyrios. If you wanted to go the route that they won't touch heroes, if that's the assumption, if they will allow heroes and maybe then just never have a plan to actually release them as a hero, my guess would be Archangel, Sunfire, Pestilence is odd, Plague, and maybe this Abraham Kyrios. I don't know. Well, Deathbird. Remember the Shi'ar race possesses talent, but might be a little too close to Archangel. There's Deathbird against Miss Marvel. Bishop versus Bishop versus Deathbird. I don't know. They have a lot to pull from, and that's very interesting. Unlike, say, the Worthy, which had just kind of been usually the people that were in that arc minus what Marvel Avengers Alliance did. So very, very interesting to see what they will do here. So, guys, let's talk about this in the comments below. Do you think... Here are some of the topics we can go on. Will it be chapter, like Odin? Will it be a world boss, like Thanos and the Black Order? Will it be yet another special? Will it be all brand new characters, or will it be uniforms for existing characters? So to sum up, to me, if I was having this conversation and not making this video, and I was asked these questions, I would say it's going to be a world boss, like Thanos. How we're going to get 7 out of what is technically 5, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Do I believe in the chance that it could be a chapter? Yeah, probably not. I mean, yeah, we got Odin that way, but I don't think so. It would make sense more a little bit for the numbers, because who cares if you're only doing 5? You could very easily double and triple up some of the bios in there. Who could be the Horsemen? I'd say most likely, logically and logistically speaking, probably people we don't have in the game. Probably people who aren't very well known and popular heroes, so that they can be released as heroes in the future. Could they go the route of releasing them now as a native tier 2, as like the world bosses in the Black Order, and then eventually uniform them into their hero set and change their abilities? Yeah, it's a possibility. But then people might go, man, that is a lot of work to get a Gambit or a Psylocke. Magneto was easy. Rogue, Beast were easy. They were easy to teach. So, like, why would they be so special? I don't know. But then again, we have special people like, you know, Songbird, White Tiger, and they were specials, and they didn't really even amount to that much. I mean, I actually like Songbird a lot. It's like deploying a turret on the battlefield. I just like putting her on auto attack. Just aim her at somebody, hit that attack button, watch her go to town like a Battlestar Galactica fighter or something like that. But I don't really think they're going to go the uniform route. I think they will be new characters. I think there will be world bosses. I don't know how we're going to get 7 days out of them. And I think there will be native T2s. I think if it, you know, Apocalypse will be universal. I think if we get Archangel, Combat, maybe, potentially, Speed, Psylocke, Speed, Gambit, Speed, although his sort of purple colors and everything seem like they would go great with Universal. Polaris, Blaster, if that goes that way, Sunfire, Blaster, Combat. Combat could probably be whoever War is. Combat and War seems to make sense. The others, hard to say. Or maybe they'll just be all universal, like, you know, the Black Order is, and Thanos. But I kind of feel like while Apocalypse could really claim the universal thing, I don't know if any of the Four Horsemen can. Especially if they go with identifiable characters and heroes or villains that we already know. We're probably going to mentally place them in a category and not consider them universal. So there you go, guys. That's my take on the news that the apocalypse is nigh. Apocalypse is coming to Marvel Future Fight. I'm happy. I'm thrilled. It's bringing MFF more and more back home to MAA. We've got the X-Men. We have Anti-Venom, who is a major player for a long time in Marvel Avengers Alliance. Wolverine, you know, popular with the beginners. Magneto certainly did very well in PvP for a long time. If you remember, when he would throw the engine part at you, if you were already magnetized, you get stunned, and that hit was huge. You could one-shot people. Phoenix, of course, resurrection tricks. Phoenix was, especially White Crown Phoenix, was very popular in PvP for a long time in MAA because her res was so bugged. Beast, Pestilence, I mean, what can I say? He was a game changer. He was the most, until like at the very end with people like Pfizer and everything, Pestilence Beast was the single most game-changing and unique, maybe not the most important, but in a lot of ways probably just the most impactful thing to ever hit MAA like that, where he just changed the landscape of the battlefield for years, even on bosses and PvE stuff. Archangel, I have a love for Archangel. I used him in 2 different time periods of PvP. Loved the Nano Plague, loved its AoE nature, the guaranteed hit with X-Force Psylocke. Made him even better than Pesty in a lot of ways. The straight up Death Touch ability on his level 9. I would love to see Psylocke coming out through this, because I love Psylocke in MAA. Not a body part thing, I just loved her skill set. And yeah, I mean, they could go the route of X-23. That might be a possibility. She's a Marvel Heroes. Marvel Heroes does touch upon some of the Apocalypse outfits. I think there is a Death Gambit, and there is a Apocalypse Iceman too. Not as quite as evil looking as MAA was, but I'm pretty sure there's an Apocalypse Iceman in there. His death aspect, as they put it. And yeah, that's about what I can think of right now. So thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you're excited, because I really am. And when they announced that X-Men were coming, this is the path and future I had hoped they would take, and they seem to be on it. So kudos to that. Peace out, everybody. Take care. Happy weekends, by the way.